Welcome to the Real CP Show. I'm your host, CP. And today's topic, white question mark male professor insults American blacks. Says they need to be more like Asians. Again, today's topic is white question mark male professor insults American blacks. Says they need to be more like Asians. Unfortunately, the system of supremacy, which is the most awesome mental manipulation force that has ever existed, that knows that the American blacks overall only have half a generation to one generation left before the overall complete destruction or the overall destruction of the American black culture. Just in that topic title itself, right? A white question mark male professor insults American blacks, says they need to be more like Asians.
100 years ago, kids in classrooms were taught the color of their skin was their most important characteristic. And if they looked a certain way, they were inferior. Today, kids are being taught that the color of their skin defines them again. And if they look a certain way, they're an oppressor. From colleges to corporations to our culture, people are making money and gaining power by pretending we haven't made any progress at all. By doubling down on the divisions we've worked so hard to heal. You know this stuff is wrong. Hear me clearly. America is not a racist country.
This is what supremacists is doing when they hear a super sellout among American blacks, and there's quite a number. Now remember, the person that just relayed, America is not a racist country. So American blacks and personnel within the Panama-based culture started as equal human beings in this country since the foundation. Against supremacists does this. Because they know how nonsensical, idiotic that sounds. And the thing about it, in this particular topic, about this white question mark professor says that black folks need to be more like Asians. And we're going to get into that on that to be like more like Asians, right? Hmm. And see, the thing about it, numbers of American blacks, yes, will get mad at what this professor did say on that. The nonsensical behavior of coming across like a Ku Klux Klan member in that rhetoric. And there were high numbers of black folks, American blacks, that got mad at that. Now, again, supremacists understands that. That's mathematically acceptable. They know that a few percentage points of American blacks are going to get upset with that nonsensical behavior because there are certain ones within the Panamese culture that continue to feel a lot more comfortable of saying nonsense, right? Because it's a naturally ingrained, generationally ingrained, stuck within a racial racism context by certain ones within the Padang-based culture. It is a natural warpness about certain ones within the Padang-based culture, with few exceptions. Supremacists know this. See, they know if it was collectively where about numbers of personnel within the Padang-based culture were not like a non-small percentage, then you could not have racial racism laws still for generations toward American blacks. Present moment, if there was an overall amount of personnel within Panama's culture There was not like if and it was a small amount of people within the predominant culture that was controlling, well then the predominant culture who has more would stop the ones who are supposed to be small and say, wait a minute, American blacks have been the number one race group that has been the most racially oppressed for centuries. The American blacks have been the most racially hated for centuries. The number one racial group that has been portrayed as the most criminality, even though statistics show different, has been American blacks. So then, if it was more of a collectiveness among American numbers of ones within the predominant culture, if it was collectively more, then that collective would stop. It's supposed to be a few, right? That does control. So of course it's not like that. And even when the situation with this particular white professor, who again question mark, and I relate that in a little bit. But let me just get right to this particular part of it, right? So this particular white male, well, question mark professor, that is out of Florida, or is a professor in psychology at this particular university in a central part of Florida. And it is relayed that he allegedly said that white Americans and white culture were under siege, right? That white culture, white Americans and white culture were under siege. It talks about how this particular associate psychology professor, his last name is Negi, Negi. I want you to think about that for a second. Negi, Negi. That's not even a typical a male name within the Padang-based culture. It's not Negi. Think about that for a second, but I'll get to that in a little bit. He was fired, but at the same time, he was reinstated through the awesomeness of supremacy, which is the most awesome mental manipulation force that has ever existed. They said he was reinstated after making several comments about black privilege. Black privilege, right? And again, supremacy does that when you hear foolish people say dumb stuff like that. Right? Black privilege. Where in history has the American blacks and personnel with the predominant culture start off in the equal footing? Golly, the foolishness of this, right? When people say such ignorant stuff. Last year, that old Professor Negi did nothing wrong. So he talked about black folks, right? That they should be more like Asians, but he didn't. But he didn't do anything wrong. And this, I'm gonna get you something in a little bit as well. Just keep that in mind. He did nothing wrong, right? So also it says, hold on for a second. So the arbitrator ruled last year that Negi did nothing wrong, and he is now claiming he suffered severe emotional distress as a result of the termination. You see how the personnel are so warped. They say idiotic Klan member type scenarios against black folks. Then they cry white tears, right, when it confronted, and then start white pelling all over the place. That is a sick minded personal personnel in society, and it is naturally ingrained in a sectionality of personnel within the predominant culture who do not and will not ever allow American blacks to be on an equal footing to them. Are you out your freaking asteroid mind? The numbers of American blacks that think so. And this system of supremacy, they do not care about a American black title. Who cares? There have been people who had medical doctor titles that have been reminded with black pain from personnel within Panama's culture. It is irrelevant. You got numbers of black personnel who have very nice houses have been reminded through black pain. Girls, they got numbers of American blacks, right, who have large bank accounts that's been reminded of black pain. You got numbers of American blacks who've had the students, their youth black students going to nice schools have been reminded of black pain. See, only foolishness will believe that in this society, among numbers of persons within a predominant culture, collectively want to see anything dealing with equality among the American blacks. That is illogical. But let me continue. Old Nagy, N-E-G-Y, or Nagy, also accused the board of negligence and abuse of process, right? In a suit he was filing, no, last year or sometime, whatever it was. They said he was saying that, oh, he was persecuted with relentlessness and cruelty that is raw even among university administrators, administrations. You see this nonsense about this knucklehead man who accused American blacks already of that they should be more like Asians. And then when he was caught, he starts white splaining, talking about how, oh, well, he was persecuted, right? And that he suffered severe emotional distress. I'm telling you, there's some personnel that are warped. It's messed up. And so, continuing, they said Nagy is claiming that he cannot be compensated by the massive losses at the hands of this college, and they mistreated him. After again, this person relaying over black privilege, about black folks have black privilege, and black folks need to be more like Asians, but he's the victim. This stuff is naturally ingrained, people, within certain sections of Panama-based culture. It's not going nowhere. This is why, again, numbers of American blacks, the ones that are gullible, do not understand. They only have half a generation to one generation left before the overall complete destruction of the American black culture. Too many internal problems. Too many, right? Continuing. They said Dr. Heggie has since been reinstated thanks to his union and the decision of a wise arbitrator. Switch with white words. And he said that alone cannot compensate him for the massive losses he suffered due to this college mistreatment of him. You talk about the darn white kettle calling the white teacup white. You got some messed up personnel within certain sections of the predominant based culture. Now again, white question mark male in this situation, I'm gonna get to that in a second. Because remember, you got personnel that come from across that Pacific Ocean, excuse me, across that Atlantic Ocean and other places that by their last names, their backgrounds and ethnicities wouldn't be considered personnel with a predominant culture within America. But at the same time, when they get over here, it's been going for generations. They slide underneath relating to the racial category of white. You see what I'm coming from? They slide under the category of white and then dip out when they say, I'm a minority. And then slip back in, or they say people of color, depending, but especially minority. And when they want to slide back in to get other whatever beneficial resources, either social, politically, or whatever it is, they dip back in and say, well, they dip back in to fall under the category of racial category of white. See, it's a very diabolical, sneaky little thing to continue to keep doing, right? But continuing, getting persecuted. He's asking these particular personnel to ensure that this particular college in Florida, in Central Florida, will never again be able to persecute a professor for protected speech the way he did, the way they did it to him. These people are really messed up. where American blacks did nothing to him and he insults American blacks. That's talking about black privilege. As if black folks, American blacks, have power and control in this society. But this is the loosely messed up vulturistic mentality of certain ones within predominant culture who can't help themselves. Now that's a personal problem for themselves, right? You can insult American blacks left and right, call them all kind of names, and the ones who utilize the N word toward American blacks as well, and whatever it is, and they get caught. The ones that do get caught, and then they back white pedal and stuff like that, and act like that they're the victims. See, that is a very mentally deranged person or person that does that, and numbers of them cannot help themselves, with few exceptions. Supremacist knows this, but continuing, he the white person getting to the point of the story as well. The white professor, that's a question mark, said in a now deleted tweet, if African Americans as a group had the same behavior profile as Asian Americans on average, performing the best academically, have the highest income, committing the lowest crime, etc., would we still be proclaiming systematic racism exists? The foolishness of that nonsense that this person and personnel relayed. So, first of all, which Asians are they talking about? See, you got these people that got this archaic clan membership in their mind mentality, and then they say the most ignorant statements, and they are in these educational facilities as well, right? Indoctrinating these students with this nonsense. Which Asian people are these personnel talking about? Which part of the Asian country who they talking about? Right? We American blacks are a monolithic culture in America. They're not made up of many different ethnic backgrounds. They're made up of one monolithic American blacks, not made up of various type of ethnic Asians. See the ignorance of that. And when you say Asians, first of all, how many overall, when you say Asians, you mean voluntarily came to America. The overall amount of American blacks did not come voluntarily to America. The number of American, the no, you see the ignorance of this nonsense. Let me sit there and show you something for a second. Let me sit there and show you something for a second. Here, the ignorance of this is ridiculous. Give me one moment here for a second. Oh yeah. Show me where this showed Asian waiting room. Show where it says Asian waiting room. And the agent says, I don't care what you say, I'm gonna go anywhere I want to go. Show me where they had an Asian, what do they call this Asian uh, plantation Asians. Show me where Asians were all in plantations, by collectively they were in plantations for centuries, and their families being broken up, and the Asian women were being robbed and made to have kids to work in the fields. And then the whole entire Civil War was dictated by status quo because they wanted Asians to know their place. What did happen? We're talking about a section of Asians didn't even really start coming over until the 1840, 1849 in the California Gold Rush. Prior to that, you were not going to have even a slight bit of more section of Asians. There are people in the California Gold Rush that they would have never heard anything about the many other different type of ethnic Asian personnel from the continent of Asia. They would have heard nothing. They wouldn't even thought about the various types of Asian personnel. How many personnel within the predominant culture were illiterate and could not even read? and right. So you got foolish personnel in certain type of education facility that say such illogically dumb statements. But continuing, so he's the author. I don't want to say the name of the book. I'm not going to give him that kind of credit, but I would just say relating to the shaming of white. With himself, he would not be considered white. Less than 100 years ago, he wouldn't be considered white by his last name. God, foolish, not knucklehead person, a person. So he said in follow up tweets, black privilege is real. In a follow up tweet, black privilege is real. Besides affirmative action, special scholarships and other set asides being shielded from legitimate criticism is a privilege. But as a group, they're missing out on much needed feedback. That fool can go to hell. Affirmative action was, I'm talking about specifically after World War II, was for males in a predominant culture. White males. It was produced from action was for basically white males and white families to better their life after World War II. Fool. You look at the book of books when they talk about when affirmative action was white. Let me say it again. We have a book of books that talk about when affirmative action was white. See, the problem is that unfortunately, us American blacks don't even see the game. And you got somebody like I'm not saying him person, don't care, he can go to hell. But Nagy, who whoever this guy is, right? His parents, you say, wait a minute, his parents, was his parents, where his parents come from? Because that last name Negi is not an American white name. I'm gonna get to that in a second. Oh, but you talking about special scholarship? What are you talking? What is that fool talking about? You have more opportunities for illegal immigrant border breaking people to sit there and have benefits more than American blacks. You have numbers of women from within the Panamanian culture that have all sorts of resources and double dipping under minority status and then minority status and then talk about women status. When you got still the racial caste system controlled by certain women within the Panamanian culture, we sit there say, are black women in the same league politically, socially, economically as women within the Panamanian culture? Have they always been equal? Are you a fool? That's a foolish thought pattern. And I despise when people say such idiotic statements like that, as if black folks had affirmative action when you got people that run as fast as possible in their own corrupt countries, corrupt politicians, right? In their own educational facilities that are not up to par. And even ones that come from really great numbers of colleges, they run as fast as possible away from that person's country. The ones I'm talking about. And boy, these people are foolish, man. And I don't know what is it that numbers of American blacks have not understood this affirmative action. Boy, these fools are stupid. He continued, this subgroup of blacks have lots of problems, many like missing fathers, having dysfunctional, uneducated mothers. Wow. Surrounded by peers with sociopathic tendencies, lots of obstacles in life. No one knows what the solution is to this complicated situation. What kind of foolish bullcrap is this? The majority of American black males are in their kids' life. Fool. The majority of American black males that do pay that say child support that they do pay child support. Foolish person. What is for people? They're too comfortable, and they're not held accountable for their foolish action. The way they keep saying stuff, they keep saying it because they're truly not held accountable. Remember the situation with the with uh, when Zimmerman killed Trayvon. Remember he killed Trayvon Zimmerman or whatever the little fellow was. He killed off. and he's walking around free after he done killed off that man, killed off the young fellow. When people, when Harvard people, dispatch people tell him, do not, do not sit there and go toward that young fellow, and he did it anyway. And he still, and Zimmerman is still walking around like nothing happened. See, again, you got personnel within certain parts of predominant culture, they are very comfortable with insulting American blacks because they say, what are they going to do to us? What are they going to do? Nothing. But watch this. Oh, Professor Nagy, do you think he would not know his place? Say, for instance, he talks about what we call Jewish people. I'm going to get to that in a second, especially with that name Nagy, N-E-G-Y, or Nagy. Do you think he would sit there and say, hey, that old thing called the Holocaust or a Holocaust? Let me phrase that. Even though you had African Holocaust before a Holocaust, even though you have a Black Holocaust continuously pre World War One, pre World War II, before Hitler even came on the scene, Black folks still getting lynched. Black folks still going through racial segregation. And even after World War II, Black folks still in segregated units in the service. Black folks still getting killed off still after World War II, still. But people want to talk about a Holocaust. What an insult. But do you think, oh, Professor Nagy would have said, hey, that Holocaust, oh, those personnel need to stop talking about that Holocaust. They need to get on with their lives. Of course they're not going to do that because they know he knows his place and others know their place. But they feel they can insult black folks left and right, American blacks left and right. They know they feel that they can insult American blacks left and right because they know that there really will be no consequences, constructive consequences to remind them, hold your mouth, go bully someone else. They know there's no consequences to that, constructive consequences. Now, with that being said, give me one moment. I want to sit there and I want to sit there and read something here. Because remember, one of the things he was talking about, well, one of the main things he was talking about, well, black folks should be more like Asians, right? He said black folks, American blacks, should be more like Asians, right? Let me sit there and show you something for a second. Now, remember, overall, overall, when you say Asians, that's very broad. Because again, which Asians is this food talking about? Because the top Asian culture that was coming to the United States, and again, that was only around the California Gold Rush around 1840, 1849, the California Gold Rush. Prior to that, you would have such a extreme, even more minuscule, if you want to say Asian personnel, and that still would have been a section or a piece of sections of Asians. And the main personnel of Asian background or generically stereotyped Asian background would have been Chinese. There's no such thing as Koreans running around prior to 1848, 1849. There was no Koreans. There certainly was no Vietnamese personnel. There was no Hmong people running around. There was no Cambodian people running around. You see the point I'm getting at? So this foolish Nagy and whoever else says such idiotic bull, you know what statements without knowing what they're talking about. And some of them do know what they're talking about, but they are full of clan membership like mentality. But since he said that, oh, black folks need to be more like uh, Asians, let me sit there and show you that. You know, he's like, oh, is that right? Let me show you something.
What's the issue?
What's up?
Why are you coming over here?
I just want to see what you guys are taking pictures of.
Why is it your business?
Oh, you know what? This is my home.
Okay, mine too. Why are you taking pictures
Where
of
do
me?
you live?
I live in Scottsdale. Why are you taking pictures of me?
Michigan plates?
Yeah. Why are you taking pictures of me?
Well, you know what? We've had problems here.
I don't care. You don't know me. Why are you taking pictures of me? And I don't know you. Do you know a lot of white men are doing racist things in this world, sir?
No.
You don't know that? You're not aware
I'm
of
a
that?
racist.
You are a racist.
I'm a racist.
Okay, that's fine.
Mm, mm. Yeah. You heard what that Asian man said, right? He's a racist. He said he's a racist. But old Professor Nagy said black folks need to be more like Asians. Let's show something else again. Okay. So give me 1 second. Let me show you something else. Let me show you something else. Give me one moment here, right?
Get the fuck off me. You know what? Y'all getting a... I'm a female, so I'm only female. Are you serious?
Yes, I hit me.
No, I did not.
You hit me.
Oh, you getting a whole lot. Get the fuck off me.
Here at 3400 Wilson Boulevard.
Get the fuck off me.
What's going on here?
Get off me.
The address is Misha. It's down at Wilson Boulevard. Wilson Boulevard.
I cannot believe.
1 minute. You're a woman.
Get off me. I was not stealing.
You're still
No, I was not. You checked my purse. Get off. Get.
You hit me. No.
Get off me. Cause you're
Hmm. So Professor Nagy, fool, was talking about black folks need to be more like Asians, and that Asian man and that Asian woman, and you saw how they were sitting there treating that American black woman as a thief. But old Professor Nagy, well, they need to be more like Asians. May he go to hell. May he go straight to hell somewhere soon. Boy, these people, boy. When I was talking about earlier about Niggy or Nagay, whatever his name is, how in general that name can also give me 1 second here. That name is not a typical American uh, person from within the Padana-based culture. It's not, right? Give me 1 second here. It is not, right? And so you look that name up, you say, wait a minute now. That name is not even a typical American male name within the Padana-based culture, right? So a person will need to look that name up and see if they can find out where that name might originate from. Because again, you can have certain nuances, right? Like Nagy, which sounds about the same as Negi, is Hungarian. Well, plus or minus Hungarian, right? Nagy, this version says is the most common Hungarian surname. Now again, Nagy might be for some other similar place, but that's not a typical American uh, male name, right? Now, let me read you something else for a second. Since he says black folks, American blacks need to be more like Asians, let me read you something. Uh, an owner and operator of an India-based call centers sentenced to prison for scamming U.S. victims out of millions of dollars. Let me repeat this again. Old Professor Nagy, with that old bull crap mentality he used, he can go straight to hell. Says American blacks supposed to be like more like Asians, right? In this particular example, owner and operator of India, which would be considered Asia, owner and operator of owner and operator of Indian-based call centers, plural, sentenced to prison for scamming U.S. victims out of millions of dollars. But old Professor Nagy, right, the old playing white victimhood, right? White victimhood, playing white victimhood, while he knowing he's not accepted. He know by his last name he really isn't a typical American white male, but how many times he slid under, and supremacy knows this, slid under the banner of racial context relating to white maleness. But he will be considered a minority based upon his last name. He can go to hell. I can't stand when people play that type of disturbing demonic tactics. And unfortunately, numbers of American blacks still don't even realize this. But get into this story. It said an Indian national was sentenced to 20 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release in the Southern District of Texas for his role in operating and funding India based call centers that defrauded U.S. victims out of millions of dollars between 2013 and 2016. And his last name was Patel. Mm, Asian, he would be considered. They said the defendant, this Asian male, defrauded vulnerable U.S. citizens out of tens of millions of dollars by spearheading a conspiracy whose members boldly impersonated federal government officials and preyed on victims' fears of adverse government actions. Mm, 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 mm. It is said that Patel and his co-conspirators perpetrated a complex scheme in which employees from call centers in this long name, not going to say it, starts with an and the place in India, impersonated officials from these particular some government entities, and also the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and engaged in other telephone call scams designed to defraud victims throughout the United States. In his plea, this Asian male named Patel, uh, as the top person in India and the boss for whom most of the other defendants worked, and the owner of multiple call centers. But old Professor Nagy talking about black folks need to be more like Asians. He can go to hell on a Super Express. Let's go to another example, right? Since old Professor Nagy, right, old white playing white victimhood, said that the American blacks need to be more like Asians, right? And by the way, how we know the Asian personnel run as fast as possible from that particular person's country of Asian origins to get to America? Because in their own country, they can be educated, they can know all kind of languages, and they will look like the next person. They will not stand out. Oh, you from a certain Asian country? Which one? First of all, and say because like you do realize people don't realize. There are people who do realize. I guess Professor Nagy in that bullcrap mentality, he seemed to fail to realize that there is various other Asian countries that have various types of terrible poverty, terrible corruption, right? But Professor Nagy don't seem to understand that, does he? Right? Now again, it's not a personal thing. I can care less. He can go to hell. But it's ridiculously tiring, unfortunately, that American blacks continue to keep allowing people to play American blacks as fiddles. Another particular example, a former Raytheon engineer. He was sentenced for exporting sensitive military related technology to China. This guy's last name was Sun, Sun, a Chinese national and naturalized citizen of the United States, was sentenced to 38 months in prison by, I'm going to all that. See, Sun Sun previously pleaded guilty to one felony count of violating the Arms Export Control Act. Sun was employed in Tucson for 10 years as an electrical engineer with Raytheon Missiles and Defense, right? Sun had access to information directly related to defense related technology. Some of this defense technical information constituted what is defined as defense articles, which are controlled and prohibited from export without a license under uh, the AECA and the International Tariffs and Arms Regulations. From December 2018 to January 2019, Sun, this Asian, traveled from the United States to China on a personal trip. On that trip, Sun brought among unclassified technical information in this company in his company issued computer, including data associated with an advanced missile guidance system that was controlled and regulated under that AECA and the ITAR, which is the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. Despite having been trained to handle these materials correctly, Sun knowingly. So this Asian guy knowingly transported the information to China without an export license. But Professor Nagy talking about black folks need to sit there and black folks need to sit there and just be more like Asians, right? What a foolish nonsense, clan member type nonsense. That's clan memberish, right? One last thing I want to sit there and share. Underrate my professor. Underrate my professor, old Professor Nagy, and I'm only talking about 2023. Let me just read you a few little things on here. This is Rate My Professor, right? Relating to old Professor Nagy, right? Old white victimhood, Professor Nagy, right? This one particular one says, I found it concerning that Professor Nagy made generalizations about entire religions and cultures in class. As someone who is not particularly religious, I felt uncomfortable when he focused on three main religions. It made me feel like the beliefs, it made me feel like the beliefs and background of others were not valued in the classroom. Another one, absolutely horrible experience with this Professor. Let me say this again. Absolutely, not me, them. Absolutely horrible experience with this professor, Nagy. Ignore the good reviews. Ignore the good reviews they had on here. Some. They are made by people who lean to his side of political thought and opinions. Read the reviews about how he was fired for misconduct, which I went over that, and that's the primary of this particular topic, right? How he was fired for misconduct, right? And then the supremacists, the most awesome mental manipulation force that's ever existed. He got right back in. He got right back in, cried white wolf left and right, and got his position back. Number of times they don't, but he got his position back, right? It said this: the man covers his ideals under the guise of free speech. That's one of the things I was talking about earlier, and in the thing I was reading, right? He wanted to try to disguise it with white disguise of free speech, calling black folks talking very bad about American blacks, black privilege, and those black males doing this, and uneducated black mothers doing that, and affirmative action. When again, the number one people who benefit of affirmative action was males and women within the predominant culture. The number one people who've had laws and policies for them is numbers of males and women within the predominant culture. That fool is silly, right? Foolish. Mm. The classroom is highly uncomfortable because of this professor. Uh, Let me read some more. Let me read a couple more. I'm gonna stop. Nagi, whatever his name is a very opinionated professor, and I frankly found some of his opinions offensive, especially when he is teaching about other cultures. He was also aggressive at times, and it caused apprehension from students when it came to participating and asking questions. Hmm. And this other person wrote, if you are a minority, which I'm not going to play that little silly game, but I'm relaying to them because that's been chastised within quite a number of people to utilize the generically, whatever the heck that's supposed to mean, minority, like people of color. Those are very generic, nonsensical terminologies relating to American blacks. Minority, what is that supposed to mean? What does a minority person look like? Negi, N-E-G-Y, that would be considered a minority in this system of supremacy. A woman within a predominant culture is considered a minority, right? A border breaking illegal immigration personnel, determined by where they're at, will be considered a minority and are a people of color. You see the game of that? Golly, man. But American blacks are almost finished up. That's why I say American blacks only have half a generation to one generation left. before the overall complete destruction of the American black culture. Because these games are so ridiculous. These games are so ridiculous that quite a number of American blacks don't even realize what is going on still, right? But let me and then remember, let me show this. Let me show this. One moment. Me. One moment here. One moment. Let's see something here. I mean, what if we got here? Students need to be aware that this professor was fired. This is last year from this college for violating the this particular college code of ethics. He was only rehired on a technicality. Students have complained that he ignored them when they brought up claims of sexual harassment against the TA. He has claimed that black privilege is real and he creates a hostile learning environment. So he played white privilege tactics, cried white wolfness, right? And luckily for him, he got his their and tenure position back after insulting black folks, basically. Call them all kind of names. But see, watch this. Look at this fool. He's from within the predominant culture. But see, old Professor Nagy, he won't talk about who are the number one people who commit the most crimes in this country. That is personnel within the predominant culture. He won't talk about who has created the most heinous racial terrorist laws against the people. Personnel within various parts of various personnel within the who has lynched the most people, showed the most racial terrorism within the country. Personnel within the predominant culture, with few exceptions. But Professor McGee, he won't talk about that, right? See, old Professor McGee won't talk about somebody like this evilness in his eyes. Yes. He won't talk about that, will he? Where this male within predominant culture had made threatening things against this particular police sergeant, and he was talking about how he does not like how he takes the life of cops. This is what this male within the predominant culture was saying. But old Professor Nagy, he won't talk about that kind of stuff, right? What about this old Professor Nagy? Professor Nagy, he don't want to talk about people like her. She's from the predominant culture. This is not a long time ago when this woman was sitting there shooting up the school and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They don't talk about that. But they want to sit there and just eyeball American blacks, right? I'm gonna show you one last thing a little bit, right? I'm gonna show you one last thing on this. Oh, no, watch this for a second.
Oh, I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. As I grind to Louisiana, my true love for to see. Oh, it rained so hard the day I left, the weather it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh,
One more time.
Oh, I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. As I grind to Louisiana, my true love for to see. Oh, it rained so hard the day I left, the weather it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, don't you cry for me. I've come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee.
Mm-mm. But Professor Nigga want to talk about black folks have black privilege. Man, he can go to hell. He can go to hell. This is kind of nonsense, man. That this stuff is continuously tolerated. This stuff is continuously tolerated by quite a number of American blacks. This is the power of black pain in society, right? But Professor Nigga want to talk about those type of things, will he? Right? He can't talk about. He don't want to talk about stuff like that. Oh no, 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 no. Watch this for a second. Oh, Professor Nate gonna talk about that. This is going down. This person, these Ku Klux Klan type people, right? We're going down predominantly black areas, right, with that Confederate flag. Oh, somebody needs to remind Professor Nagy with his hellified, dumb, idiotic self. Hey, Professor Nagy, you just happen to be probably who said that Professor Nagy didn't get in his position because of being a minority. Where was his parents from? Because they surely could not be typical American whites, both his parents, based upon that name, Negi. So when he explained how what other culture had the most hatred put upon them for generations, with no break, and dare not say that nonsensical terminology of Native Americans. Which Native Americans? First of all, there are Native Americans that were sitting there enslaving black folks. Try to hell again. And how many numbers of uncalculable, well, anyway, how many numbers of what we call Native Americans that were nowhere removed from their reservations and brought to Oklahoma? Try again. And how many get reparations? Try again. Oh, Professor Nagy, he won't talk about that. He won't talk about, hey, won't you tell what we call Native Americans to stop getting that affirmative action, stop getting that old reparations. He won't talk about that. This is what quite a number of personnel within certain parts of Paname's culture do. That's just funny to me when I see that sometime. Let me show that again. Give me one moment. Let me find that. Let me find out again. This is from Sergeant Old Schultz from a series called Hogan's Heroes. Hogan's Heroes, right? It was called that. It was based upon World War II, and it's supposed to be dealing with comedic type situations and how these particular American POWs were captured and these different kind of ventures in Starlock 13. Well, was another Starlock name before that, but Starlock 13 is the main name for this over in Germany, and what they was talking about on this. But let me find this again. This is what certain numbers of personnel within Paname's culture do on this. But they want to blame what the ones I'm talking about. They want to blame American blacks. Golly. And then you have the audacity of quite a number of other cultures who, again, cannot come to America as fast as possible to get away from their own countries. because if they was doing very well known countries and their country was profiting because of them, they would not be arriving in America at such a fast pace on that overall. I'm gonna show one last thing a little bit. Remember Professor Nagy want to act like that black folks had black privilege, even though the foundation of this country was set upon by uh, uh, the backbones and blood and sweat and the tears and combination all over the place off of black pain, not white pain, not white free labor, and black folks benefiting off white pain and suffering. But Professor Nagy, he ain't want to talk about that because he can't, because it's ingrained within certain personnel within Paname's culture to sit there and act like they see no evil, hear no evil. And what makes it even messed up more, the very few amount of personnel within Paname's culture who were trying to do some things to help and correct certain historical and not even present time. That's the messed up part about it. It was more last century where there are numbers of small numbers of males and female, well, primarily males within certain parts of the Paname's culture, with few percentage exceptions of certain women within Paname's culture, they were trying to do the right thing for the American blacks. And you had a collective numbers of males and females within the Paname's culture that weren't hearing that. That's when they would call them wiggers, right? Well, that's more of a modern term, but those times they would call them the N word, trying to help out American blacks. So credit given to the numbers of males and females within parts of the Padamese culture who have tried to do the right thing. Tried, not a lot, but at least they tried to do the right thing. But they tell American blacks, just pull your own self by your bootstraps. Oh my goodness, boy, they have a hellified game going on, right? Right? Oh, Professor Nagy, again, he won't talk about this. Colored. That wasn't black folks, American blacks, sitting there telling white folks, males and females, hey, you need to go to the entrance behind that back, or there's a special waiting room for you, males and females within the Panamanian culture that was dictated by numbers of American blacks. And you got different cultures running as fast as possible again to America, not knowing a freaking thing about true American history, right? But benefiting off of black pain. Oh my goodness. But they got a game going on. They got a game going on.
A customer captured this video as the suspect yelled racial slurs at 40-year-old Anton Patterson, who is black. It happened.
I don't want to go there. But Professor Nigga don't want to talk about that. Let's play another.
This is News for Nashville.
I called him the N-word. I ain't gonna lie.
An elected official in Sumner County admits to calling his next door neighbors a racial slur on camera. And now his biracial neighbor says he should step down from office.
Our chief.
It didn't even matter. Biracial, that still didn't matter. The one drop rule. See, there wasn't no one drop rule saying, oh, if you're Asian, your one drop rule means you're Asian. Because first of all, somebody said, which Asian? Which background Asian? Do you see where I'm coming from? The American blacks have no comparison of the amount of racial hatred put upon them. Nobody else can compare to that. Many cultures are certain personnel within certain cultures and backgrounds and things like that are Johnny come latelys and Susan come latelys. And you got the nerve of even some numbers of Asian personnel. Again, I'm not talking about some of the good ones. I'm talking about collectively the ones who know they are, that benefit off black pain and have the nerve to look down upon American blacks when that person native certain parts of the Asian country, they would be looked down upon as nothing. And even if they had some stuff going on, they would be no different than another Asian person in the other person's country. So they run as fast as possible to America to get free resources and benefits and however types of monetary resources for them, specifically for immigrants and border breakers and international personnel, students, or wherever it is, to help them out, minorities and people of color, things like that. But at the same time, again, American blacks are told to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. This is why, again, in closing this topic, the American blacks only have half a generation to one generation left before the overall complete destruction of the American black culture. Thank you for tuning in to the Real CP show. Give me 1 second here.